if you can't get it done with a team, then you're not going to build a great organization. You've got to get other team members. They've got to get excited. They have to feel like their role is important.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Pick Now podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Munn. We talk to entrepreneurs, founders, CEOs about their leadership journey, the tough decisions along the way, and how they learned from them. And today I have Chris Michalak. Chris, you have probably a little bit different career path than a lot of my guests, but I think in particular, your journey to CEO and then your more recent shift to executive chairman, I think there's a lot of learnings for our audience in that. I will let you introduce yourself very briefly. Obviously, the bio is in the show notes for people who want to dive a little bit deeper. Welcome to the Pick Now podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. And I look forward to our conversation. I am now the executive chairman at Personify. I was the CEO of Personify and its predecessor company, Virgin Pulse, and a couple other CEO gigs before that create an interesting background and experience. And looking forward to sharing a little bit about that.
Awesome. So let's go way back to the beginning. I suspect, like me, you always dreamed of a career in insurance and employee benefits.
Yeah. It is not where you always start. You know, when you graduate undergrad or graduate school or what have you, you have an impression of what the path is going to look like and how it's going to unfold in front of you. And first and foremost, it always goes up and to the right, your own vision of what it looks like.
Of course, straight line, man.
Straight line. Like I just get promoted from one job to another until I'm in charge of everything. But yeah, it takes a more topsy-turvy path. And I've had my ups and downs over that period of time. I think if you take somebody like me, the first reaction is, wow, that guy, you know, he made it. Like you know, they must have been up and to the right for him. And I think people will always be surprised to hear, well, actually, you know, I had a couple of big downfalls during the course of my career that I'm not afraid to talk about or embarrassed by, because I think some of the greatest lessons learned, some of the, greatest personal development came from those moments and the clarification of why am I doing what am I doing, and what do I want to do going forward, that comes in, sort of the crucible of very difficult situations at the same time.
So take us to one of those, maybe an early one where you thought, oh, this is different than I thought.
Yeah, I would say for me, it was all moving in the right direction until I got my first CEO job. And I was 40 years old at the time, which back then seemed like a big deal. Now 29-year-old guys get CEO jobs all the time. So it's a different world today than it was back then. But, I was young in my career when I took on being the CEO of Buck Consultants. And we had new ownership at the time, new expectations, a different way of looking at the world than I was typically accustomed to. And that put me somewhat at odds, from a strategy perspective. What did I think the business ought to look like? What did they think the business ought to look like? And, and through that whole process, I ended up being let go. So I worked my entire career to get to that point where I'm running a consulting firm. Like I'm the CEO of a $400 million, 2,500 person global consulting firm. This is like, this to me is the ring. Like I don't have a much bigger expectation than this. Like I'm here, I'm 40 and I got it done. And it's pretty, I'm impressed by myself, Jeff. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Can we go back to right before that? So what is it that Buck saw in you that said, yeah, Chris is our next CEO?
Yeah, I would say the person who put me in the job was a visionary. And I would say the people who have put me in the jobs they've put me in have all been visionary to some extent. And I think we all as leaders who pick the people who we want to go do the work with or pick our successors, it's having a vision with that person or for that person about what's possible. And so I would say my boss at the time had a vision for what was possible. I was, as I said, I was younger by age than most of the other candidates for that job. all the other candidates who'd ever been the CEO of Buck before I was the CEO of Buck were actuaries that lived in New York City.
Wow.
And so I was a non-actuary that lived in Chicago that had a growth orientation. And I think the view was the future of the firm is growth. We've got to go demonstrate the ability to grow this company. And Chris demonstrates some of those capabilities. And I ran the Chicago office and the central region of the firm, both of which were the fastest growing parts of the organization at the time. And I think the view was, let's go find somebody who's a growth leader who helps the organization to really put the foot on the gas as it relates to growth.
So they saw what you were doing, or at least your mentor, your the visionary who appointed you, saw what you were doing and said, we need as an organization more of what Chris is doing in Chicago.
Yeah. Essentially, that's it. And and they put me in that job. And I wouldn't say I was over my skis, but I would say the expectations, as I said earlier, about what was possible were not in alignment with my vision of what I thought was possible. So essentially, we were operating at a high teens margin. The expectation was that we'd operate at a mid-20s margin. And at that time, that was a stretch over the time period. It meant the kind of taking out of heads. And in a consulting firm at the time where headcount sometimes equals revenue growth and margin.
Yeah, totally.
We were in different places, the way that we saw the mechanics of the way the business worked and what that was going to create. And that led to, my, at some point being told, hey, we don't need your point of view and we're going to move on.
Do you think the broader culture of the organization, you talked about, actuaries, and I can, I spent a lot of years at Hewitt. I understand that perspective. Do you think it was like a kind of a rejection by the larger organization of what you brought to the table? They just weren't ready for it, or was, how do you see it?
Yeah, what I've come to realize over the course of my career is sometimes operating models are just different. In this particular case, a services-oriented outsourcing business that operated, margins, the fewer people, the higher margin, right? Like that was the core of the whole way that business thought. They owned a consulting firm where the core was more professional services and billing models attached to people. So there were absolutely different mechanics in sort of the underlying way that the businesses ran. And so I think it was just kind of misunderstanding in the early days post a merger about what was possible. Right. I mean, they since, by the way, after I left, they ended up reducing the margin expectation to about where it was. And I think sometimes in leadership, you make tough calls and sometimes that reveals things to the folks that are making those decisions. In this particular case, they ended up at an 18% margin or something like that. And that's where it landed. So, different business models, different expectations, different levels of experience of people who are in the business. My big learning from the whole thing, Jeff, was I don't own the business. It's not my business. I'm not the founder. I'm not the owner. I am a caretaker who is responsible for optimizing the outcomes on behalf of the people who own that business. And that mentality has really helped me, particularly over the last decade as I've predominantly played in private equity, where again, I am not the founder owner. I am, a hired leader to go be entrusted with this business and its outcomes on behalf of a set of owners who at the end of the day have the say. And I think that was a great lesson learned for me early on in my, kind of CEO and leadership responsibilities, to understand I'm not the ultimate owner of this business, and other people ultimately get to make the call.
Yeah, I think that's a huge misconception that most people have about the CEO role. It's like, oh, well, I would love to be a CEO where I don't have a boss. And that's absolutely, especially in a private equity, but anytime you have outside investors, right? Or a board, or, depending on the organization, you are, even a solopreneur, their customers are telling them what they want.
Yeah.
You still have a boss or several.
Yeah. I think private equity might be the most unique in this regard. If you're a publicly traded company, you have a board and, some dissipated sense of power with shareholders and so forth. I think what's really unique about private equity is you typically have a single, small set of owners who are directing the organization, not leading it, not owning the management routines, but directing kind of where they want it to go with a very clear thesis. And
what equation are you solving for? Right.
That's right.
And then it's up to you as the CEO to figure out how all the pieces fit together.
That partnership, absolutely crucial. And, so I'm thankful for, lessons learned in difficult situations earlier on in my career that end up putting me in a good place later in my career as I work with my private equity partners.
So what happens, go back to, do you remember what day it was when you were fired as the CEO of Buck?
I remember it pretty vividly, Jeff.
Do you remember
one of those days you remember?
Yeah. Do you remember? Yeah.
I was the funny thing is I was in New York City and I remember I lived in Chicago at the time. Like, I got to get home, it's and I had a great opportunity. I had a lot of things going on in my personal life at that time, at the same time. Mm-hmm. And so it was a great opportunity for me to reflect and to figure out the next thing and to downshift, which I did. Right. I ended up going to Aon and took a much smaller role, significantly smaller.
I want to go back just a little bit, Chris, because I think this is important. I know people go through these big events that look horrible at the time.
Yeah.
Like there's the, oh my God, this is happening to me. What am I going to do? What are people going to think? Like all the stories that kind of jump in, like, what was that like for you? And how long did it take you to say, you know what, there might be some good in this?
Well, it took a while before I really saw the good. When you're on that pathway of up and to the right for, you go, almost 20 years into my career at that point.
Right.
You just you're like, wait, what just happened here?
Was this like the biggest negative event in your career thus far?
Yeah. Almost the only negative event in my career thus far.
Yeah.
So it was an adjustment period for me. And I didn't have a lot of time to adjust. I had a family and, all that sort of stuff. I wasn't independently wealthy and able to sit on the bench for a year and contemplate, my future and, what was the meaning in my life. And I didn't have that kind of
ponder things at the lake house.
No, I didn't have that. So, so it was, hey, let's go find another opportunity, and some people would say, hey, listen, you were the CEO, go be a CEO somewhere else. Well, I went the opposite direction. I mean, I just said, hey, listen, I've done that. I've been running hard for 20 years. I've got 2 young kids. I'm going to go take a different type of role. And that's what I did. And so, ended up putting me on another decades-long path of up and to the right, all with a great company at Aon, and really enjoyed that run and all that came with it.
How did you end up at Aon? Like, what was the path to that, and what made you decide? Because you're moving from a big role at a smaller organization to a smaller role at a bigger organization.
Yes,
and that's a shift.
Yep. And my boss to be at Aon, Catherine Haley, fantastic leader. Just loved working for Catherine. She interviewed me. We were 20 minutes into the interview and she's like, I have to have you on my team.
Wow.
Super decisive. You're an athlete. I need athletes. I have no idea what you want me to give you. And it's kind of irrelevant, but I have to have you join, our team and what we're doing. And she, explained the vision of what they were doing and where they were going. And so I put my bet on Catherine to some extent and said, hey, I'm going to join this team and hope that her vision for my athleticism, my leadership athleticism, plays out. And I continue to find bigger and bigger opportunities. So my first job at Aon, I go from 400 million in revenue and 2,500 people globally at Buck to I had 32 guys, each who had a $1 million quota that were selling consulting services at Aon. So I went, it's $32 million. Like that's my whole thing, is $32 million. And over the course of the next 10 years, that turns into $1 billion worth of commercial activity, $600 million in quota, 400 million plus in renewals every year that had to get done, and running the whole commercial operation for what became the Aon Hewitt business. And so, great 10-year run and up and to the right, and, lots of great opportunities along the way to contribute not just Aon Hewitt, but Aon as a whole in terms of initiatives that we did and so forth.
How much of that were you hoping for and foreseeing as a possibility when you took that job, and how much of it was just a complete surprise?
I'm a kind of, I'd say if you did a strength finders on me, being future oriented is one of my strengths, being kind of out there. So I think I'm always envisioning a future. So I would say a lot of what I thought about ended up becoming, the visions that I had about my ability to contribute there. I had no idea we were going to do an absolutely massive merger that, essentially created, the market leader in the human capital consulting and outsourcing space, fortunate things happen along the way like that.
Right. What year did you join Aon?
I joined, I think it was 2007, 2008, right about that time. So,
okay. So I mean, Aon buying Hewitt, which is the transaction you're talking about. I mean, that happens in 2010. So it's not even a glimmer in anyone's eye at that point.
Nope. I'm just in the fifth largest, human capital consulting and outsourcing firm. And we that leadership team decided we're going to be scrappy and we're going to win in the marketplace. We're going to take on the big guys and we're going to chip away at them. And we were doing a pretty good job. And then we decided we're going to merge with the Hewitt business at the time.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So then what's the role that you take when that transaction happens?
Yeah, maybe my up and to the right thing's a little off, because I take a role that is like a put Chris to the side role. When the merger happens, I end up being the chief I laugh a little bit. I was the chief operating officer of the consulting business in the Americas. So it's like, hey, we don't really have a job for Chris. Let's put him over here, and give him, let's go. Yeah. He'll be in charge of finding synergies and, on and on. So I kind of actually got put to the side a lot. It was kind of a reverse merger a little bit. The, Hewitt teams were,
at least with that part of the business. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they were twice as big as the Aon Consulting, maybe even a little more than twice as big. So, it ended up being a little bit of a reverse merger. Well, I was in that kind of like side role for a short period of time. I want to say less than a year. And then I took on a bigger role in the combined organization, running all of account management. Then somebody left and I took on all of account management plus all of sales. And then I took all sales ops and all the marketing. And by the time I was done, I was running all of the commercial function for the Aon Hewitt business, which I think was a $4.5 billion business or something like it.
So when you get moved into that, I don't know if you use the word parking lot, but it kind of feels like a little bit of a parking lot role. Yeah. And those happen sometimes in acquisitions where it's just like, we're going to give Chris a C in his title so he knows we're thinking of him, but we're going to kind of let the dust settle a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So what is it that helps you move from that role, that parking lot role, to, there's this other role that we want you to play, Chris?
Yeah, I think part of it is patience, and maybe a little patience learned from my prior experience at Buck, right? The patience to say, hey, things change. They change all the time. And, things are likely to change here. And so the patience around, change, I think is important. The willingness to embrace the other side was a big part of it. I think there was a little bit of a like rub between some Aon folks and some Hewitt folks at the time. Like, they were just different firms. One was a scrappy group of people who wanted to kind of take on the big guys. They were the big guys who had a very strong, as you know from your time there, a very strong cultural, thread running through them and kind of strong points of view about what good looks like.
Right.
Like I remember saying to somebody in the early days, hey, we should be more scrappy. And then somebody from Hewitt saying, scrappy, that's a terrible word. Why would we want to be scrappy? We should be great. And I'm like, well, I don't know. I've seen scrappy beat great a lot of times. So like there were different mentalities. My strength was I really appreciated a lot of what the Hewitt folks brought to the table. So they weren't the enemy to me, or they were my colleagues. Like I embraced them as, hey, they bring a lot of good to the table. My embracing of them and kind of like, my willingness to see the great in what they were doing, I think put me in a good position to, find my way back into the mainstream of leadership there.
Uh-huh. And then you get promoted pretty quickly into more and more senior roles. What do you, in addition to the, hey, I valued what they were up to, and I can tell you from conversations with my legacy Hewitt friends that I've had along the way, I think you were one of the few people from the parent who ended up like being welcomed into the fold from like a cultural perspective. And I think that served you really well. What else do you think? Yeah.
I was the only senior Aon person in the company by the time I was at the legacy Aon leader. I was the only one left at the end of it. And again, it wasn't, I'm not patting myself on the back. It just was my willingness to embrace and be a part of and support the whole and recognize, hey, we're all in this together. And I think that carried a lot of, weight for the Hewitt folks too. Like, I think they embraced me, to your point, and said, hey, this guy's with us, let's go, and so, you asked about like, how did it all happen, Jeff? And, I would say it's always some combination of results and sponsorship. It's always some combination of I'm delivering with the team of people that I've created. Not I'm delivering alone, but like I and this team that I'm a part of is delivering. Like we're creating the results that people want. And, when you put great people on the field and you have, good direction, clear, metrics that you're going for, et cetera, you get to good outcomes. Good outcomes combined with sponsorship. Somebody in the organization who says, I see that person has greater potential than what they're doing today, and I want to continue to champion them in the organization. In my career experience, it has always been the combination. It has never been just me. It has never been just an outcome. It's always been this combination of this person who's in a more senior position than me, might be my boss, might be my boss's boss, sees my full potential and wants to help me go experience or contribute that full potential, to the organization. And so, I'm I can go back and look at my whole career and I find the person along the way who's like, that guy can make a bigger difference than he's making. And I am going to help champion in that. And I've had some amazing people in my career who've just, who've lifted me up to the next level.
Well, it sounds like you've also done that for people in your organization too. So I think you obviously learned that along the way. And I think what I see in you, and we were talking a little bit about, the idea of visionaries, and sometimes visionaries don't necessarily win out. The visionary without the team executing often struggles. Seems like you've been able to do both.
Yeah, I think the other great gift that was given to me very early on in my, high school life is the belief that leaders make a difference. Like if you have great leadership, any organization with great leadership will succeed. Like, I grew up in a world where, you believe that leadership could be the thing that carries you over the line. And so I have always made a very concerted effort to create a leadership ethos in the companies I've been a part of, and to surround myself with what I think are really good leaders. And I think that also makes a huge difference. I mean, I think when you're surrounded by really good people go, something good is happening over there. Like, I don't know what Chris is doing exactly, but something good is happening over there, because I see that group of people. I see leaders in that group of people. I see people who are committed to the vision, who are communicating their vision and getting other people rallied around it. And I want to be a part of that, or I want to continue to fuel that and nurture that in the organization, because it's a good thing. And so I think, to me, that's the power of leadership. It just creates this thing you want to be a part of, because people see like, hey, that's a powerful center of performance and culture and so forth within the organization.
I would love to dig into in a little bit of granularity, if you're able. There's something that you identified that, someone saw something in you and was able to communicate that to you in a way that you internalized it and said, yeah, maybe I can do that. Maybe we can do that. Maybe I want to be part of this. And it got you excited about it. And then you, conversely, have been able to do that with your teams. Like, what is it like to receive that? And then how do you communicate that to someone, that sense of belief, in a way that they actually see it and act on it?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I mean, it's pretty powerful when somebody says to you, and I'll go back to the Catherine Haley example, hey, I have to have you on my team. You're an athlete. And somebody who communicates with that form of clarity and sort of personal commitment to you, like, that garners a lot of your attention and your focus and your discretionary effort. Like, you say, listen, I want to be a part of that. And so I think it's like a self-reinforcing, at some point it's self-reinforced. It's like you cast that vision into somebody, they want to be a part of it, and now they're a part of it, and they're doing it with other people. And so it cascades down, and that's the power of great leadership is, great leaders, like, they enroll people in a vision, and those people are then enrolling people, and that's what creates a movement. And so, so that's, to me, that's the power of it all. And I like to think sometimes I'm the catalyst of that, and sometimes somebody else is the catalyst who helped me to get excited about something and move into it. I think over the last 10 years, it's been more my trying to be the catalyst as the CEO of the companies I've been a part of, and trying to create that movement with the people that I lead.
Yeah. So were there any challenges for you? I want to give you a little bit of a context. Some of the founders that I'm working with are at much smaller organizations, and one of their main challenges in their leadership journey is, simplest, it's delegation, but more complicated, it's like, how do I entrust someone with something and trust them to do it and get out of the way when I've been in the habit of basically doing it all myself? Have there been different points in your career where you've struggled with that, and how did you handle it? Because you obviously handled it well. You are where you are today.
Yeah. I mean, at some point, if you grow your organization, you will not have the time, attention, or energy to be able to do the thing that you were able to do when it was smaller.
Right.
You just won't be able to do it. And
the thing that probably got you the promotion, right? You almost have to cast aside. It's like, well, that model isn't valid anymore.
Yeah. Being the best programmer, which might help you start up a new technology firm, like, that isn't going to be the thing that enables you to scale that capability. And by the way, I'm not suggesting you shouldn't all continue to be a great programmer. Just know that you need to have other people filling in other holes that are necessary to go move that overall entity forward. So I've been super fortunate that I have had a great operations person by my side in almost every role I've had since my early part of my career. For whatever reason, I figured out I'm not great at this operational thing, and this other person is. And so having a partner that's been very operational alongside my other skill sets has been an absolute gift for me. That allowed me to delegate, and allowed me, by the way, to get feedback, and allowed me to, have a good partner in crime. And so having good operational people, like for me, was my kind of weakness that I knew I needed to fill. And then the other thing I would just say is, like, if you can't get it done with a team, then you're not going to build a great organization. You've got to get other team members. They've got to get excited. They have to feel like their role is important. Like, I've never wanted to be, and never felt I was, and certainly objectively never was, the smartest person in the room. Like, that has never been important to me. Mm-hmm. What's important to me is, like, I've been a best idea wins guy. And I'll argue all day long about I'll create enough friction in an organization because I think best idea ought to win. You ought to be able to support that idea and tell me why it's the best idea. So it doesn't have to be my idea. It just needs to be the best idea. And so having that mentality brings other people into the fold. Hey, their idea, could be the best, and they can see the things that they care about and think are important move forward in the organization because it gets supported because it is the best idea. So there are lots of different ways to engage and involve and delegate to people as a part of, leading an organization or a group of people.
So instinctively, I think most people tend to gravitate toward and hire people who are like them. What you're talking about in bringing in a number two is someone who's different and has a different skill set. Like, how did you train yourself to see that and kind of hire someone who might, if the person's doing their job right, there's going to be friction between the two of you.
Yeah, absolutely. So my CFO at my last organization, when he joined, I realized pretty quickly that he and I were very different. He's Dutch, and he had a very direct style about him.
Yeah. You didn't need to say that. You said he's Dutch.
Yeah. And what I realized pretty quickly is he's really important to this organization. We're going to transact this company in the next 2 years.
Yeah.
And I said to him at one point, and I said this publicly within the organization, Rick's job is to get us ready for exit. My job is to build a great company. If I do my job, building a great company, and Rick does his job, getting us ready for exit, if the best of both of our contributions to that come together, when we go to exit, we'll be exiting as a great company that is financially in the best position to transact.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it's as good an example of like two people doing their thing to make the entire entity better. And my recognizing that my greatest gift to the organization was not going to be in enabling us to be financially in the best position. My best contribution was building a great organization with a vision for the future that people were excited to be a part of. His contribution was going to be his contribution. And together that created a better whole. And so Rick and I didn't always see things in the same way, but we had a great relationship around the things that were important to us about the organization. We supported each other in that. And I think that made for an absolutely fantastic partnership.
So when you're describing those two roles and those two sets of goals, there's going to be tension between them. How did you work through that tension and still have, the solid relationship that you described? Because those can be some rough moments. Yeah,
Rick and I, and I'm sure, don't interview Rick, just take my word on it. We had some very, very difficult conversations during our time together. and the true test of like, are we in it together is like, we're buddies today. We call each other like, I'm for him and his career and what he's doing. He's for my success. Like, and I think at some point you know that you're in it together and you're willing to have the difficult, hard, conversation with the other person because you're so committed to the success of the organization and your part in making it successful. And so like, I absolutely appreciate him and his, and the things that he fought for. And I think he appreciates me and the things I was fighting for. And we had the ability to be really candid with each other. And at some point, I felt like I crossed the line at one point and was a little tougher on him than maybe I needed to be. I also had a relationship with him where I could go to him and say, I'm sorry. I think I did that poorly. I think I could have done that better. And communicate to him, I want you to know I do value and appreciate you. You're important here. I care about you. You're making a difference. And I didn't handle that situation right. And so I'm not afraid to do that. I'm imperfect. I'm not afraid to say I'm sorry to somebody, even when I'm the CEO. And, a lot of CEOs might think, hey, you don't need to say you're sorry. Like, you're the CEO. It's your way of the highway. That has been my mentality. And with, that situation, it led to a better and deeper relationship for the two of us.
I think you hit on one of the key underestimated things of being a CEO. And that is trust and safety, right? Like if your people don't feel safe telling you the truth, you can't be a good leader.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a Pat Lencioni guy. I'm a 5 dysfunctions of the team guy. Foundation of the whole thing is trust. Like you can't have a difficult conversation. You can't get to an optimal outcome. Those things don't happen unless you create an environment of trust where people say, hey, listen, I'm willing to bring this up because, this is important to our achievement of the ultimate objectives that we have. All of that begins with a sense of trust and belief, like, hey, we're in this together. And so that's foundational for me. Every leadership team I've ever been a part of, I've shared that as foundational and, and tried to, encourage and foster an environment where people trust me. They think I'm candid. They think I'm transparent. And they know that I've got the best interest of the organization, the shareholders, and the customer in mind in the decisions that I make.
I think I see that through line all through what you've said, that realization that as CEO, you're not really the boss. You're more like a steward of an organization where there are a lot of different influences and figuring out how to do that and how to navigate that. Yeah. I mean, that feels like it's led to a lot of your success in doing this.
Yeah. I think the steward thing is a good way to look at it. I feel like when somebody asks me to be the CEO, they're entrusting me with an organization and a set of outcomes. Like, Chris, like we're giving you this organization to lead and to build and to foster a culture. And when I say organization, that means the people, the clients, everything that comes with it. But they're also always giving me a set of objectives that go with that as well. Yeah. And expectations and things they want to accomplish. And so my job is to steward this thing while moving it towards those objectives so that there's a real sense of purpose and a real clarity about what we're trying to accomplish together as a company. And so both of those things are equally important. The kind of stewardship of the organization and its movement towards a clear set of outcomes and objectives that matter to the owners of the company.
Yeah. I think if we go back in our conversation, I think where we are right now in your career is kind of in this transition between Aon and Alight. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Big bet was made in 2017. Chris Michalak, go take the outsourcing business, what is now the tech-enabled service business that became Alight, and go be the CEO of that. Go work with.
So you became CEO of Alight before it was actually spun off.
Yes, consistent with my representations earlier, somebody had a vision. Chris can do this job. For whatever reason, they came to the conclusion Chris Michalak is the guy to go lead this business. And so the $2.3 billion Alight business, which was all of the tech-enabled services, payroll, Workday implementation, all of that stuff that spun out of Aon in 2017, I was asked to lead it and go sell that company to a set of possible acquirers in 2016 and into 2017. Blackstone ended up being the acquirer, so I end up at one of the largest, most prestigious private equity firms as a CEO of this company.
So for someone who started out in consulting and that business model, this makes no sense.
Yeah, Jeff. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people said that in 2017 as well. I mean, here's the funny thing. You're absolutely right. My entire career was in professional services. And even when I was running the whole commercial function, yes, I was selling the outsourcing and tech-enabled service business, but I was also selling the consulting business. And I was very close to both all along the way. I was an Aon guy. All of this business was the Hewitt stuff.
It was it was Hewitt TBA, right?
Yeah, I was a commercial guy. All of this business was the operational stuff. It was the same equivalency of taking the buck job, being the Chicago human capital consultant who was growth oriented versus a New York actuary who was, was kind of analytical. This was the same exact thing. Like, let's give the operational business to this growth guy who came from the other organization. And again, a person and persons who said, that's our guy, Christy Savacool, Greg Case, like they said, Chris is our guy to go do this really important work of divesting this organization and then taking it over if the acquirers will have it.
Mm-hmm. So I think this is, for all of that to happen, you needed to know those individuals and have good relationships with them, good enough that they could see that thing in you. I think that's one of the differences between working in a larger organization and kind of working your way up than it is, starting something and growing it and bringing in people. It's like the whole, I hate to say politics, but it's politics, right? It's relationships. It's like, and there are people who play that game with sharp elbows. And there are people, you don't strike me as that. Like, how did you navigate that? And how much thought did you give to navigating it versus just, I'm going to do my job and deliver on what's expected and trust that good things will happen?
Yeah. If there were 5 candidates for that job, and if I was even one of them, I would have been number 5. If I were even a candidate when this whole idea of spinning off the business and finding somebody to run it, I was for sure not a lead candidate when the idea was hatched. And how I ended up from not a lead candidate to being the person that was selected, I will never, ever really know.
That's fascinating to me.
I won't know, like, what conversations happened, where and with whom, where the ultimate decision was made. I remember when I was told, I was asked, would you like to do this? I stood up, like, directly out of my chair, like blown away, kind of like, and surprised. Like I didn't have an expectation. I wasn't going to be disappointed if they did not pick me because I didn't even consider myself a lead candidate. I was, to your point, I was just doing my job over here and hoping for the best. And for whatever reason, all of the politics and relationships and everything conspired to have me selected to do that job.
So there wasn't a, hey, we're gonna run a process. We've got 5 people in mind. You're gonna meet with blah 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 blah, and then we'll decide. It was just you were picked.
Yeah, I was just picked, and again, I have no idea what happened behind the scenes. I really don't.
Right.
I haven't really, it never mattered to me that much, like what happened. I was asked, do I want to do this? I said, let me sleep on it, and came to the conclusion that, this would be a great next opportunity in my career. I had a really close friend at the time who was in private equity, and I had lunch with him at one point. I couldn't say anything about it. It was still confidential. We were even doing this transaction.
Right.
And I started to talk with him about taking a job in private equity. And I said, hey, listen, there's a possibility I end up in a role where I'm running a large firm of this nature, blah, 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 for private equity. And he said, nobody's hiring you for that job. And I said, well, I knew I had the job. And so I had this realization, no private equity firm in the right mind is giving me this job to run a $2.3 billion company without previous private equity CEO experience. I even realize that today, now having sat at, 3 or 4 private equity firms alongside, I know what they look for in a CEO. The fact that I had that job,
Well, they look for somebody who's done that very same thing before, because they're trying to minimize their risk.
And hey, I knew they were doing a search for my replacement 3 months into my being there. So after the transaction gets done, May of 2017, I know they're out to search for my replacement, because they're looking for their confidence and so forth. I don't think I was ever actually their guy. Like, this is the guy we chose. I was the guy they were given. We executed over the first 3 years, to a plan that I think you'd have a hard time arguing, we didn't deliver, because almost all of the value created in that firm between 2017 and the time they went public in 21 was done in the first 3 years of my leadership. We took $250 million worth of cost out. The growth rate went from essentially flat to mid-single digits. We did 7 acquisitions that, helped the firm to grow more quickly. Everything was not perfect, but boy, an enormous amount of value was created for our private equity partners in Blackstone and New Mountain Capital and others in that time frame, and it enables them to go public at a higher multiple on significantly higher EBITDA, and the results of my tenure there speak for themselves.
And then they bring in someone to take it to the next level, right?
They bring in somebody because they want to go public, and they want to get a multiple that looks more like a tech multiple. And so they brought in a software guy to, kind of lead the next stage of it. And
I've seen that playbook a few places.
Yeah. I mean, again, sometimes the results speak for themselves. And, I think if Blackstone was reflective, they'd say, hey, we earned, more than 2.5 times our money on this thing, all based on the results that were created in the first 3 years of that operation under Chris's leadership. And so whether or not I was the right guy to go lead the IPO at that point, maybe a different discussion. And so that's another thing that, I have an appreciation for, hey, being the right guy at one time makes you maybe not the right guy at another time. And sometimes maybe in hindsight, you really were the right guy. And so
and how do you know, right? Can we go back to the moment that you're offered a light, although I'm not sure it's a light, that CEO position, and it was a huge leap for you, and you were kind of flabbergasted and you wanted to sleep on it. How much trouble did you have saying yes? I mean, the reason this is called the Pick Now podcast is sometimes you just got to do stuff often, not knowing how it's going to work or if it's going to work. And that seems like a big moment for you. Was that a big deal, or you was like, I gotta try. I'm going to regret not trying if I say no. What was it for you?
Yeah. I mean, it's a big deal. And honest truth, Jeff, is I had no idea how much of a big deal it was. And, meaning how many hours, how much stress, how many difficult meetings and tough decisions. I talk about taking $250 million worth of cost out. That's a lot of impact on individual people who you see as your colleagues, and sometimes your friends. And, like you have no idea about all those things the day you say yes to that job. And so it was difficult. But as I said earlier, I'm kind of a forward-leaning, future-oriented person. And I was like, this is the next thing. Like, I'm going to lean into this. And, as an individual, you start making trades like, hey, I could stay at Aon. I could have a pretty good career at Aon. Like, they like me at Aon. I think they did. I could have had a pretty good run with Greg and Greg Case and that team. And I was a known successful entity in their environment. And so you start making the trades. Safe bet. Mm-hmm. That was totally the safe bet. Stay at Aon, get my stock options, do that thing that is consistent and dependable. Yeah. Or go do this thing over here that has lots of variability to it, lots of possible things that, could go wrong. And I don't know. I'm more that guy. I mean, I'm not a Vegas guy, but I'm more of enough of a risk taker.
I have tried to figure out what the percentages are. I mean, I would say the vast majority of people manage for what I call good enough. It's like, it's the safe bet. I'm liked here. I know what this looks like. I'll make a good living. Whatever values you, and there's nothing wrong with that. And then there's a small minority. I don't know if it's 20%, 10%, 5%, who are like, I want to figure out what exactly I and this organization are capable of.
Yeah. Essentially, Jeff, that's what it comes down to. The safer bet from a career perspective, or the adventure of doing something very different. And here's what I would say. The next 3 years of my life, I learned as much about business, as much about what it takes to be successful, as much about finances and operations, and you just name it. I learned more in the next 3 years than I think I learned in 20 years prior.
Wow.
I don't say that, flippantly. I've sat down, reflected on it. The things that I knew I just wasn't close enough to in other roles. Like, you can get kind of pigeonholed. Like, I was the commercial guy. Well, you can, like other people. And when you're good at delegation, you're like, okay, they got it over there. So I don't have to worry about that. And I didn't think about what was going on over there. Suddenly you now have it all, and you've got every part of it, the operational part, the financial part, the commercial part, the general counsel part, we're writing our S1 part. Like, now all kinds of different things that you didn't have exposure to are fully exposed, and in an environment where you've got to be on top of, every single one of those
failure are severe.
Correct. So
that's a high wire act, right? Like, bringing all of that together in a holistic way on the fly, learning the job as you're doing it. Yeah. It sounds absolutely thrilling and terrifying.
Yeah, there were certainly days that were, challenging. Like, when you're rolling out a program to, fundamentally impact the underlying costs of the business in the way that we did, that alone is, requires great change management expertise, like great people to say, how are we going to communicate it? How are we going to enroll people in it? How are we going to create a movement that people are excited about, even though it's really hard to do? How are we going to actually fundamentally, operationally execute all of that?
Right.
Like, that's an enormous hill to climb and to get over, and requires getting your most senior leadership team wrapped around that challenge so that they can wrap the rest of the organization around that as you go accomplish it. And so during the course where we're doing that really hard work, that really challenging work, our employee engagement scores went up.
Wow.
Our NPS with clients went up. And so I often say during that 3-year period, every one of our core metrics was going up and to the right. Our revenue growth was going up. Our margin percentage went up. Our NPS score with customers went up. Our NPS score with members went up. Our engagement score with employees went up. And I give a lot of credit to the leadership team, the movement they created, and the change management effort. It's funny. People don't usually say like change management was the reason we were successful, but like all of those things don't all collectively move in that same direction unless you've created a really strong movement around what you're trying to accomplish and why you're accomplishing it, and really good focus on outcomes.
Yeah. So let's jump forward a little bit, because I want to be sensitive to your time. The move, Alight and then Virgin. Like how did you end up getting involved in Virgin and then Personify? And I do want to spend a few minutes talking about your transition to executive chair as well.
Yeah, maybe just to be really brief. So I leave Alight in April of 2020, right in the middle of COVID, and I start making phone calls to private equity firms about roles they might have or things I might be able to do to help them. And during the course of that year, I ended up working with 4 private equity firms on deals that they were doing. And again, a whole new set of things to learn and do. Like now I'm collaborating on deals and so forth. Not brand new to me at that point, but good little lessons.
At least a different focus and perspective, right?
Yes. Yeah. And getting to know some other people. And I really value the relationships I created during that year. One of the teams that I was trying to help was considering acquiring Virgin Pulse.
Okay.
And when that deal fell apart, the guys at Marlin Equity Partners, my private equity partners there, reached out to me and said, hey, would you be interested in being the CEO of Virgin Pulse? And so I ended up joining the Virgin Pulse team in 2021. I moved to Rhode Island, where they were headquartered, and thus began the next run for them over the next few years of restructuring the organization, driving higher growth rates, and getting to a place where that company, between myself and Rick, my CFO, and the rest of the team, put it in a position to exit at a favorable place for our private equity partners in Marlin.
And then Personify. Did you exit the CEO role when that transaction happened, or was it after, or like what was the timing of that?
I didn't. It was really important to New Mountain Capital that I stay on as the CEO when we did the transaction at the end of 23. So I agreed to stay on as the CEO, create a little continuity. But I knew that like Personify was going to have to go on another 4 or 5 year run for it to end up in a place where it would be a good transaction for New Mountain. And I didn't know that I had that in me. At this point, I didn't know that I wanted to do another CEO run over the next 5 years. And so, I was very candid with New Mountain, both at the deal point of the deal, as well as after the deal was done. About a year into it, I said, hey, listen, I'm probably not your guy. We might want to consider, spending this year trying to find the right person to, be the successor. And they said, got it. Will you stay on as exec chair? Exec chair, the exec and exec chairman, you're going to be a full-time employee of the company in 2025, which I was. I wore a number of hats. I did a bunch of different things. I'm a low ego person, so it was easy for me to just say, hey, put me in, coach. Like, where can I be most helpful?
Well, and that's very different than that transition usually happens.
Yes, very different. The great news is, rather than spending a year trying to find my successor, Pete McCabe, who sat on our board, raised his hand and said, hey, I'd love to take that role. And so Pete, also a kind of low ego person, he's very operational. So this goes to like having a good partner. He's super operational. I've always had a great operational partner. I'm very commercial in my orientation. So the two of us together over the course of 2025, I think made, we collaborated together to lead the firm. He is the CEO, me as executive chair, wearing a lot of different hats. I was the commercial leader at one point for a part of the year. And my willingness to do what I needed to do while he was doing the things that he needed to do to get his arms around the company, we made an enormous amount of progress in the company over the course of 25. And I think it's in a really good place today. So now I'm moving into a more traditional chair role over the course of, probably the next year. I don't have a big need for, clear definition of when I'm the chair or exec chair. Those titles don't matter at this point. I'm highly invested in the success of the company. I'm highly invested in Pete's success and just doing what I need to do to make sure the company is well positioned.
Yeah. So what do you see, if you had to predict what the biggest challenge will be for you in transitioning to this more traditional chairman role, what do you think it is?
Yeah, I'm a very hands-on person. I'm a roll up my sleeves person. I'm a go do it person. And I'm a highly relational person. And so I think my two challenges are, you know, what are the relationships that I have with people in the company that I've spent a lot of time investing in? Like, what's my role with respect to them as the chairman versus as the CEO or their direct leader? Like, so figuring out the kind of relational dynamics. I'm still doing one-on-one calls with probably 6 to 10 people today.
Wow.
As the chair. Now that will, again, that's going to continue to change over time, but like that relational kind of having the right relational distance and relate, that's going to be a challenging one. And then, when to roll up my sleeves and get involved in something versus, hey, just be the chairman, Chris, your oversight. And chairman, being on a board in private equity is a little bit different than in public company. There's a little less segregation of duty than you'd see in a public company. So being an engaged board member is okay in private equity. But over time, I think my level of engagement will change and my roll up my sleeves orientation will, be less important to the success of the firm going forward as I then just play more of an advisory capacity as a more traditional board role. So I think those are the two transitions that'll happen over the course of the next 12 to 24 months.
Yeah. I mean, I think that comes down to your relationship with Pete and Pete's willingness to say, hey, Chris, I don't need you for this. Yeah. Or, hey, Chris, the kids are starting to go to mom, and if they don't like the answer, then go to dad. There are these weird dynamics that happen.
The great news is we even now we have none of that. Like, and I've been very careful about that. Like, I'm super transparent with Pete about every conversation I have. When there's feedback for him or for me, like, I'd like to think both of us are willing to say, hey, here's a little feedback that might be helpful.
Yeah.
There's no distance between Pete and I right now. And that's why it works, because we have no distance between us. Like, I think there's a very high level of trust between the two of us that we're both in it for the same exact reason, which is to build an organization that's a great company and at some point we'll be able to transact. Like, I think we both have the same sort of focus and energy. And so right now there's zero distance between us, and that's why it's working.
Well, and my impression looking in from the outside is that Pete gives more of a Mr. Inside vibe and you give more a Mr. Outside vibe. And so that's a nice way to kind of divvy up those responsibilities. And it sounds like you both feel comfortable in that as well.
It has been helpful over the last year. It's been helpful over the last year in particular as we made the transition. Now, I think Pete, to, his great credit and talent and capability, like, he doesn't need me necessarily for the outside stuff. I think he's glad I'm there in certain cases, but he's got it. And, he's fully running the company and I'm there to enhance the things that he's doing where he sees that that's beneficial to the company. And so again, like, I'm very, I don't have to be the smartest guy in the room. I don't have to be the important player who gets something done. I'm taking my lead from Pete's leadership and trying to figure out how as a chairman I can make things better. So that's
I mean, I think you just hit the nail on the head right there. Taking your lead from him. I mean, that's so important in this transition. So Chris, In our remaining minute or two, have you given any thought to like, what's next? You said you're a future oriented person. Like, what do you see yourself doing in 5 years, 10 years? Like, what's the future version of Chris in all this?
Yeah, Jeff, I'm at that point, where a lot of us get to this point at some point where you say like, what's next? And my uncle, who just passed away a couple of weeks ago, he wrote a bunch of books. One of the books he wrote was a book called Gun Lab. And the essence of Gun Lab is in a long distance race, they shoot the gun off to start the race. And then the last lap, when the lead runners get to the last lap, they shoot the gun off again.
Yeah.
Well, career-wise, I'm in the gun lab. And I'm at the end of this, this thing that we call a career. And I'm asking myself, how do I make the gun lab really valuable? Like, how do I make a great contribution in my gun lab? That could be in a for-profit entity. It could be in a not-for-profit entity. It could be in the way that I volunteer. It could be in the way that I lead my family. Yeah. And so I'm trying to, I think my big goal over the next, 12 months or so is to go figure out, what am I going to do with that gun lab? Like, how am I going to run the race, that last lap of energy, with all that I have, and leave it all on the track, with respect to my personal life, my professional life, my family life, like, how am I going to, what's my contribution there? And so, I'm thankful for Robert and his, thoughtfulness in writing that book, and, kind of leading me towards, hey, how do I finish my gun lab really well?
Yeah. I love that analogy. I think the challenge for a lot of leaders is there's not like a real clear line on when that gun lab, when you're even in that gun lab. Like, you don't, how do you even know? I mean, for you, you've had this more linear transition of roles. There are some people who, I work with a founder who exits and they're 48 years old, and they instinctively want to go into the next startup or start the next thing, or just kind of get that adrenaline hit and stay in the arena. Right. And yet the learning is often when they shift into something else, and how they do that is a really interesting process.
If you've defined yourself solely by what you do professionally, you will have a very difficult time exiting that hamster wheel. Yeah. If it has become the sole way that you think about your value in this world, you will have a hard time leaving it. And so now, I haven't done that. Like, I've had many other things that have defined who I am as a person, and what's important to me and what I value. Despite having a lot of professional success, I've had great balance across the things that matter to me most. And so it has not defined me in it. And yet, Jeff, even I am finding it difficult to kind of let it all go. And I'm trying to figure out, is that because I'm holding on, or is that because I literally have more to do? And you're right, like figuring out, has that gun lab sounded, and should I like totally like completely change, just go full not-for-profit, go help, build wells in Africa? Like, should I do that? Or should I find a way to contribute to, private equity companies as they continue to acquire and lead companies in their portfolio? I'm in a really key decision-making point in my life, and, trying to figure out, what's the greatest contribution for the next 10 years. Cause, my view is, I've got 10 great years of probably physical health left. And, hey, what do I want to do with that 10 great years of physical health, and how do I want to spend it? And so.
Well, and another way to think about it too is, well, what could I be doing now so that I actually have 20 great years of physical health left? And what would I do with that?
That too. Yeah. the longevity thing is a real thing. And, like you start really thinking about it. Like,
as I age, I notice the older people are getting younger and younger.
Yes,
Maybe that's just my perspective, but
we're lifting weights and taking GLP-1s and doing everything we can to, trying to figure out how we're going to stay on this earth longer. So, yeah.
I mean, I think when I see people go through these transitions, the thing that I see as a key to their success is instead of focusing on what they're leaving, like it's time for me to leave, it's time for me to exit, it's time for me to move on to this role, whatever, they're focused on what they're going to.
Yeah.
And I think just to keep asking the question, what lights me up?
Yeah.
And you won't go very far wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. These are great questions, and, things I'm contemplating right now. And the good news is I got a little, gift of time to start doing that kind of thinking. And so I'm excited about it. I feel great about, the last 30 years of work, and at the same time, excited about what the next 10 or 20 years brings.
It's hard to believe. I mean, I've got a career of similar length than you, and it's like, where did the time go? I still feel like I'm just getting started.
Yeah. It feels that way. And then, like, you think back to your first job, and you go, that was a long, long time ago, that first job.
What an idiot I was. Yeah.
I really didn't know much, but I thought I was pretty smart.
Yeah. So, well, Chris, thank you so much for the time. Thank you for your willingness to go deep. How do people keep track of what's going on at Personify and all the stuff that you're involved in? How do folks reach out to you if you want that to happen?
Yeah, we have a great presence online, and just, we didn't cover this, but Personify, doing great work with self-insured employers around their healthcare, helping people make better decisions about their health every day, which leads to better outcomes, leads to lower costs. Like, we're proud of the work we're doing. It's great to be a part of a mission-driven organization. Yeah. And so you can find us online and see the great work that we're doing with our clients all over the world.
All right. Well, Chris, thanks, you very much for joining us. Thank you, everybody, for watching this episode of the Pick Now podcast, and we'll see you next time. Take care.